Welcome back to Media7. It was 76 years ago this month since Elizabeth McCombs won the Littleton seat in the by-election and became New Zealand's first female MP in 1933. The scene was set for McCombs' victory by the arrival of emergent feminist writing, not the least of it from her sister, Stella Allen, in the nation's newspapers. So, how have women in politics fared in the media since? Sarah Daniel takes a look in Take Two.
It was this month 116 years ago that New Zealand women got the vote. First in the world, Kate Shepherd and her fellow suffragettes marched to the parliamentary summit and knocked the bastard off. New Zealand led the world. In Britain, suffragette Emily Davison threw herself under the King's racehorse and died for the cause. New Zealand women may have won the right, but it was 40 years before a woman actually sat in Parliament. Elizabeth McCombs became the first woman MP in New Zealand. These are proud moments in history, but how far have women come?
There isn't any room at the top for local girls like us.
I'm not giving up.
116 years later, women are still getting whipped in the workplace.
If you ever say another word about me or make another indecent proposal, I'm going to get that gun of mine, and I'm going to change you from a rooster to a hen with one shot.
We might have jobs, but in New Zealand, women are paid 12.5% less than their male colleagues.
But that wasn't what they told me. I couldn't do that.
Around the world, it's much the same. Women are trying to break through the glass ceiling.
I think women in the workforce have it the toughest. Childbirth and a career. Try that. They should make men stay home for 5 months and see how they can raise a child.
What? There's no paper in here? You guys have read
Oh yeah, don't go breaking a nail. This is a man's world.
And when it's not about the pay or the power, women in power still pay in other ways.
If you follow my lead, you can avoid some of the mistakes I've made here.
Hello, John.
Like that one.
Former Prime Minister Helen Clark was constantly criticised for not having children.
I don't have children, right? I don't have children.
Julia Gillard, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, was described as deliberately barren and therefore not fit to govern. Dee Dee Myers may have been the first female White House press secretary, but she still came up against it.
I had a lower rank, a smaller office, and of course a smaller salary than my male predecessors.
So as we remember the suffragettes, there's still work to be done and a war to be won.
Joining me now to talk about women, Parliament and the press are journalist and former MP Deborah Cothington.
Hi.
And Massey University media teacher and author Margie Comrie. Welcome to both of you. Now, Deborah, how was it for you? Did you feel you were treated differently than the male MP in who otherwise the same circumstances would have been?
Well, of course, I went in there from being a journalist, so I made the decision when I went in because I'd gone from being a private person to being someone who was paid by the taxpayer, that I decided that you're no longer a private person, you don't have the right to refuse interviews because, you know, I'd had people refuse interviews to me and I didn't want to put other journalists in that situation. So I got into quite a lot of trouble because, you know, for various reasons. And I couldn't turn down interviews having made that decision. Some of the trouble was my own making, some of it wasn't my making. But I definitely do think that the media does treat women differently. Yes, we've come a long way, but there are double standards in the way that the media treat women differently.
Were there specific examples in your case?
Oh, absolutely. Examples, yes. I mean, when I met my present husband when I was in Parliament and I got engaged, and Michelle Hewitson did an interview with me on that, and I just reread it before I came on up today. And at the end of it, I did actually turn to her and say, "You're going to set me up, aren't you, Michelle?" And she did set me up. I mean, all the way through she said, "Just look at Deborah Coddington giggling away like a love-struck teenager." Now, I don't do giggling. You just change that word giggling to to chuckling or laughing, and it's a whole different tone of an interview. Can you imagine talking to Lockwood Smith, who got married recently, the Speaker of the House, and calling him giggling? I don't think so. I don't think that a journalist would say that about the Speaker of the House.
So was it worse in that respect than actually being in journalism?
How do you mean?
In terms of being treated, you know, like a grown-up, basically.
Yes, I think it is. I mean, just the clip there about Helen Clark. Christine Rankin stood on the steps of Parliament during the Sue Bradford bill and said, that woman in there, she's got no children, she's got no right to tell us how to bring up our children. No one is saying about John Boscawen, the ACT MP, who's going around the country with his bill about bringing back smacking of children and saying, that MP's got no children, he's got no right to bring it. Why aren't the journalists going and asking him what right he's got to tell us how that we can smack them a little bit? When he's got no children, why aren't the press gallery going and asking him what right he's got?
That's actually a really good question. Margie, I've never seen anyone even raise that as an issue with John Boscawen.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that seems to happen is that the media still doesn't know how to deal with powerful women. They haven't got the vocabulary, they just don't know where they are. And they would be absolutely shocked if they knew that that there was media misogyny, but there is. And your thing about the giggle is classic, okay? So a woman is bossy, she's a bossy boots, a man is strong. Helen Clark was Stalinist, and, you know, our perhaps most Stalinist Prime Minister, Mr Muldoon, was a strong man. So it's those things, the giggle, the cat fight versus the stoush. Yeah. Those sort of things, apart from the fact that everyone, the media spends a lot more time looking at women's appearance, their relationships, than they do with men.
It's interesting to look at the Stalinist thing, the Helen grad and all the vocabulary that came with that seems to have emerged from one particular place, Lindsay Perigo's Radio Pacific breakfast show. And then it went mainstream.
And it was picked up during the National Party meeting by the soon-to-be Prime Minister, and it was carried on, and everyone thought that it was okay in the Evening Standard, the Evening Post, not the Palmerston North one, when they were talking about Helen Clark disciplining Marion Hobbs. She was a bossy boots, Helen Clark. She was, in fact, a control freak, and she wasn't strong. And so did you know that she was such a control freak that they're calling Wellington Stalingrad?
And look at the way the BBC jumped on her when she wore a very stylish designer pantsuit, not just for the Queen's banquet, but also for the walkabout down at the Viaduct Basin, which anyone who's been down there knows can be so windy that it would blow your skirt up in a flash.
Risky
but the BBC were very sniffy, and you know, hooray for our Prime Minister at the time said, I think the BBC should just get a life. This is 2002, not 1642. You know, I mean, imagine if she'd worn a miniskirt. She's actually got great legs. She would have got away with wearing a miniskirt. But actually, you said Lindsay Perigo, I think you did. But you know, going through the research, women in the media are some of the worst at this looksism and putting down. And if you look, I know we're talking about New Zealand, but look at what happened to Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State when she went to the Congo. First Secretary of State to go to the Congo to try and put a stop to rape, you know, rape capital of the world. And someone asked her what her husband thought of some financial affair. And quite understandably, she got a bit snippy. You know, she said, I'm Secretary of State. Don't ask me what my husband thinks. I'm not channeling my husband. Maureen Dowd, Tina Brown, Ann Coulter ripped into her in the most nasty way. All US columnists in ways that men, from my research,
Maureen
didn't
Dowd
do.
seems to be the particular offender here. I mean, she was the one that came up with the girly man thing for Al Gore because she deemed him insufficiently masculine. Yeah. There's almost like a degree of obsession here, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. And what you said about the misogyny, I'm not sure if it's sexism or whether it's just a bit lazy. in the press.
And I think trying to be smart. And also, I think that in New Zealand, the journalists have been around a long time, a lot of our powerful ones, about the time when Helen Clark started. They want to show that they're still in. So it's nudge, nudge, wink, wink, lesbian. We've had the word dominatrix used about her many a time. There's the whole sexuality issue keeps coming up.
Well, it even got to the point of Photoshop dominatrix porn on certain blogs with respect to Helen Clark. Which
well, don't even go there on some of those blog sites. I mean, you just don't want to read those. You just want to have a shower if you've gone into some of those places. You know, I mean, you and I have been there before. But you know, I mean, look at Catherine Rich when she got dumped by Don Brash as social welfare spokesperson. Jane Clifton wrote about the colour of her lipstick. I think it was something like pouting purple lips and things. And I mean, I admire Jane Clifton. She's a very, very good journalist and a very good crafter of words and things like that. But occasionally she does slip into this slightly, which is very clever, I must say. And you know, you laugh at it, but can be quite cruel. And I've been the subject of it. When you know, I didn't chase Roger Kerr across the grounds of Parliament. Actually, he chased me across the grounds of Parliament. But the way it was written up, Jane Clifton wrote what was very funny, but it did hurt. It cut. She wrote it up as if, you know, her words were something like she expected me to have a Martin Bashir BBC type Princess Diana tell-all interview. It was funny, but I wasn't the bad girl there, you know. I kept my mouth shut. And it was this sort of frenemy sort of, you know, thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And the double standard too. I was thinking when Kevin Rudd visited or revealed he'd revisited a New York strip club, and all our MPs fell over themselves to tell little chuckle, nudge, nudge, wink stories. Helen Clark, who'd been asked about it, just said, you know, that it was inappropriate. She was made to look like a horrible little wowser. And then on top of it all, I mean, and you did have to laugh, this is the terrible thing, there was a cartoon of her doing a pole dance on the front page of the Dominion saying, well, look, this is what it takes to get your attention, guys. It's that whole
with Helen Clark, I can recall interviewing her not long after she became leader, before she was Prime Minister, and for the photo she dutifully put on makeup. And she made it clear she had no love for doing so, but she had realised that there was simply no option other than to do that. I've always been fascinated by the comparison between her and Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher deepened her voice, and Helen Clark was media coached into raising hers. Oh yes, we all got media coached into trying to deepen our voice. Don't be shrill. And I remember another time in the House when I was in the debate, and I was being quite feisty and things. And Michael Cullen followed me, and he got up and he said, "There's Deborah Coddington thrusting herself forward as usual." And the press gallery raced after me when I came after and said, "Michael Cullen was accusing you of pushing out your breasts." And I was quite stunned, and I didn't take it like that at all. And Michael Cullen actually came after me afterwards because they went after him, and he was actually quite upset because he didn't mean it like that, and I don't think he did mean it like that. Michael can be quite cutting, but he's quite democratic. He's cutting to everybody, and I never ever saw him being sexist actually. But the press gallery were determined to get a story out of this, that Michael Cullen was in a way sexually harassing me, and this is what the press gallery were focused on for the rest of the day. I don't think they ever wrote it because they couldn't get anything out of either of us. But you know, I mean, there was so much going on, and this was what was occupying their minds that day. And I mean, another example I was thinking of was Melissa Lee. Remember, she was voted on some international thing as one of the most attractive politicians in the world, and I thought, you should resign right now, because the press are going to think, who do you think you are? We will take you down. And what happened in that by-election? Night after night we got pictures of Melissa Lee looking haggard, looking confused, stuffing it. I mean, she didn't help herself much, but my heart went out to her because she just couldn't win after that. She couldn't win.
I think it's very confusing for women too, because you know, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Yeah.
So those who do try and draw attention to their feminine attributes, of course, are in trouble. And you just have to think of the German Prime Minister and the fellow person who, and there were 2 pictures of them with their evening dresses on and sort of fairly low cut, and the thing was you get more with us. The naked politician, I think, who stood...
the German Prime Minister who also got a back rub from George Bush, and I don't think that would have happened to a male Prime Minister.
It may, but we wouldn't have worried about it.
I was hoping to get a happy thought out of this topic, but unfortunately we've run out of time, so perhaps another time. Thank you very much, Deborah Collins and Margie Comrie. After the break, Phil Smith. Is he the new heavy hitter in TV production?